Chapter 926, Envoys of Another Country 1. Thank you, General Jian. Please thank His Majesty for me. Yi Tian made an obeisance. In the past, he needed to get on his knees to express his gratitude, but now as he had become a sage-level intermediate rank spirit cultivator, he just needed to say thank you. That was the reward for power. Servants, prepare a seat for General Jian. After that, Yi Tian turned to General Jian again and said with a faint smile, General, please take a seat. Don't bother, I can just sit by little Luo Feng. General Jian laughed and strode up to young Luo Feng. Little Luo Feng, your Aunt Shui hasn't been feeling well recently, so she can't come here this time, but she asked me to tell you that if you're free, feel free to visit her. At this time, all the guests had already taken their seats, so Jian Chengwen stopped talking and was about to sit beside young Luo Feng. However, at this moment, Yun Xiao suddenly cast a warning glance at Lin Ruobai, who was standing beside young Luo Feng. At first, Lin Ruobai didn't understand what he meant, but she soon figured it out and rushed to sit beside young Luo Feng ahead of Jian Chengwen and grinned at her. Master, do you mind if I sit here? What a jealous man he was. The general was so old and only took Master as his niece, but he still felt jealous and didn't allow him to sit beside Master. And he even used her as the shield. Young Luo Feng slightly raised her eyebrows, looked at Lin Ruobai with a faint smile, and then turned her eyes to Yun Xiao. Sit on my lap, Yun Xiao's magnetic voice slowly rang. Yun Xiao, did you do it on purpose? She slightly narrowed her eyes, and a dangerous gleam shone in her eyes. Yes. As an honest man, Yun Xiao admitted it without hesitation. Uncle Jian is just an old friend of my father. Whatever. Yun Xiao put his arm around her waist possessively. As long as he is a man, he is not allowed to approach you. Young Luo Feng smiled helplessly. This man closely guarded her against any man approaching her. However, she loved it. Seeing that young Luo Feng didn't object to it, Yun Xiao picked her up and put her down on his lap, took a grape from a bowl, carefully peeled it, took out the seeds with spiritual energy, and then put it close to her lips. Be careful not to choke. His movement was so careful and scrupulous, as if he was really worried that young Luo Feng would choke on grapes. Tut tut, said Jian Chengwen with a smile, the young people today are totally different from us. I really envy them. Sure enough, all the women in the hall looked enviously at young Luo Feng. But no one dared to covet Yun Xiao. That was because young Luo Feng's punishment of Yi Xiaoyu had frightened them, so no one dared to offend her. Some married women turned their eyes to their men and sighed. They could accept that their men couldn't be compared with Yun Xiao in terms of power, appearance, and status, but why did he still beat them in terms of a husband's love for his wife? Ha ha ha. Suddenly, a voice came from the night, shaking the whole Yi residence. Yi Tian jumped to his feet, and his wary eyes stared at the night sky like two swords. Under his stare, two white-robed old men slowly appeared and looked down at the crowd. Yi Tian's face darkened and he said with a sullen look, they're envoys of the Lanxiang Kingdom. Chapter 927, Envoys of Another Country 2. The Tianyan Kingdom ranked the lowest among the kingdoms on this continent because it only had 2 sage-level spirit cultivators. And the strongest spirit cultivator in this kingdom was only a sage-level intermediate rank spirit cultivator. So it was no match for those kingdoms that had sage-level advanced rank spirit cultivators. Therefore, the other kingdoms on the continent all despised the Tianyan Kingdom. But why did envoys of the Lanxiang Kingdom suddenly appear here? Our emperor has heard that Master Yi of the Tianyan Kingdom has become a sage-level intermediate rank spirit cultivator, so he especially sent us to congratulate you. One of the envoys smiled and said contemptuously, however, including you, there are only 2 sage-level spirit cultivators in your Tianyan Kingdom, so you have the fewest sage-level spirit cultivators among the kingdoms on this continent. Even if you have become a sage-level intermediate rank spirit cultivator, you can't change that fact. Yi Tian's eyes darkened and he asked coldly, are you here to congratulate me or to make trouble? To congratulate you, of course, the envoy smiled. If I was here to make trouble, I wouldn't have spoken to you so politely. Moreover, he couldn't beat Master Yi, who was already a sage-level spirit cultivator. So he only dared to say something to make him uncomfortable. And this time, our emperor let me bring you a gift. The envoy waved and soon a few men who carried several boxes came out from behind him. They slowly landed and put the boxes on the ground. It's heard that the Tianyan kingdom's land is rather barren, so our emperor ordered me to bring this gold and silver. I hereby send them to Master Yi. Indeed, the Tianyan kingdom was not as prosperous as the Lanxiang kingdom. However, what country would lack gold and silver? When the Lanxiang kingdom gifted them with gold and silver, it was tantamount to insulting the Tianyan kingdom. Our Tianyan kingdom is wealthy enough. We don't need these things. Take them back. Yi Tian tightly clenched his fists, his face blue with anger. If the Lanxiang kingdom weren't so powerful, he would have given the envoy a good beating. We won't take back what we have gifted. Master Yi, you don't need to appreciate our emperor too much. The envoy raised his eyebrows. Besides, I have heard that the young mistress of the Yi family is infertile, and no physician of the Tianyan kingdom is able to cure her. How useless they are. Any third-rate physician of our Lanxiang kingdom will be able to cure this disease. As long as you ask me, I will take your daughter-in-law to our Lanxiang kingdom to receive treatment. It would take several months for the news of Zhun Fengling's pregnancy to reach the Lanxiang kingdom, and the envoy didn't hear the news when he left the Lanxiang kingdom. Besides, he flew through the sky all the way without resting, so no one told him this news. No wonder he didn't know that Zhun Fengling had already pregnant. As for the Yi family's dinner party, he thought it was for celebrating Yi Tian's breakthrough. Ha ha, Yi Tian laughed sarcastically, your news is out of date. My daughter-in-law is already pregnant. Tonight, we are celebrating her pregnancy. What? The envoy was stunned. He narrowed his eyes and examined Zhun Fengling up and down. Was this woman pregnant? But he had heard that the young mistress of the Yi family was infertile. Could the physicians of the Tianyan kingdom cure her? The envoy raised the corners of his lips and said arrogantly, it seems that the reason why young mistress didn't get pregnant before wasn't because of her physique. She just needed time. If Zhun Fengling was pregnant, it proved that her body had no problems. She just needed more time. Anyway, he would never admit that the physicians of the Tianyan kingdom could cure her illness. Chapter 928, Envoys of Another Country 3. When Yi Tian heard the envoy's sarcasm, his face turned purple with rage, and his clenched fist kept trembling. He had never been humiliated like this in his life. Suddenly, a sneer was heard. Zhun Fengling, red-robed with a gallant bearing and in high spirits, walked out slowly. So this is what Lanxiang Kingdom's envoys are like. You are just like frogs in a well. In your view, anything you don't believe is false. What a rude woman. The envoy got angry and shouted, I'm talking to Yi Tian. Who are you? You don't deserve to talk with me. Before Zhun Fengling responded, Yi Jingchen, who never hesitated to protect his wife, hurriedly stood up and put Zhun Fengling behind him. She's my wife and the future mistress of the Yi family. Now, do you still think she doesn't deserve to talk with you? The envoy gave him a cold stare. Both of you don't deserve to talk to me. Only Yi Tian deserves this. He looked really arrogant. Obviously, he didn't take them seriously. Brother Yi, Zhun Fengling came out from behind Yi Jingchen, squeezed his hand, smiled at him, and then turned her eyes to the envoy. As far as I know, you are only a sky-level advanced rank spirit cultivator. Sky-level advanced rank spirit cultivators were not rare on the continent. The envoy was so arrogant just because he came from the Lanxiang kingdom. Likewise, in the Tianyan kingdom, even a second-class family's master dared not offend a servant of the Yi family. A man leaning against a big tree could enjoy the shade it provided. The envoy's eyes darkened. What are you trying to say? My meaning is simple. My father-in-law is one of the best masters on this continent anyway. But you are just a sky-level spirit cultivator. What makes you believe you deserve to talk with him? Zhun Fengling raised her eyebrows, her words arrogant and domineering. Just now, the envoy said she didn't deserve to talk with him. And in an instant, she returned his own words to him. Sure enough, hearing her words, the envoy looked quite angry, and his eyes were burning with rage. Zhun Fengling, you're really bold. I'm the envoy of the Lanxiang kingdom. How dare you be so rude to me? He furiously gnashed his teeth. Tut tut. Jian Chengwen could not bear this envoy any longer and walked out with a sneer, a contemptuous smile on his handsome face. The envoy of the Lanxiang kingdom really knows how to put on airs. As a guest here, how dare you behave so arrogantly? Don't forget, there is a rule on this continent that no two powers shall fight in private. On the continent of no return, though some kingdoms were comparatively weak, they hadn't been annexed by other kingdoms because there was a rule. If one of these kingdoms aroused public indignation, the other countries could hold a vote, and if the people who voted against the country were more than those who voted for it, they would send their soldiers to hold a punitive expedition against this kingdom. However, if it turned out just the opposite, no one was allowed to do anything against the kingdom. If there was any kingdom who dared to disobey the rule, it would be attacked by all the other kingdoms. Therefore, on this turbulent continent of no return, the relationship between the kingdoms was quite peaceful and all the kingdoms just guarded their own territories without conflict. The envoy smiled contemptuously. General Jian, when did you see me attack any man of your Tianyan kingdom? I'm just here to deliver our emperor's gift. That's all. He didn't attack anyone, he was only making sarcastic remarks. Besides, the Yi family didn't only have Yi Tian, it also had a lot of god-level spirit cultivators. How would he dare to attack anyone here? Chapter 929, Envoys of Another Country 4. Of course, he also believed that no one in the Yi family dared to hurt him. Even the grumpy Jun Fengling would not dare to do anything to him, the envoy of the Lanxiang kingdom. This was why he dared to be so arrogant. Unfortunately, he missed one person, a person even more grumpy than Jun Fengling. Bang! Just as the envoy was making sarcastic remarks, a foot suddenly came from behind him and kicked him hard on the head. With a thud, his body suddenly flew out and heavily fell into the crowd. The guards accompanying him were so stunned that they didn't come back to their senses until a long time later, and then they hurriedly surrounded the white-robed girl who was standing under the moonlight. You! The envoy struggled to get up from the ground, his hair hanging loosely over his back and his face ferocious. How dare you attack me? Guards, catch this woman! Boom! Just as the guards pulled out their weapons and were about to attack young Luo Feng, they suddenly felt a cold aura from behind. Before they had the time to react, the aura had struck them and slammed their bodies onto the ground. In the shades of night, the man's black robe seemed to blend into the darkness, but even so, nothing could cover up his handsome and cold face. He stood silently beside the white-robed girl, like a loyal guard, guarding the one he was willing to protect with the rest of his life. Those guards, terrified by the man's cold stare, felt a chill on their backs and dared not to look at him again. The white-robed woman moved again. Without any sign, she appeared in front of the envoy, kicked hard on his chest with her right foot, and his body immediately flew away. Yi Tian, the envoy covered his aching chest with his hand and roared, "How dare your Yi family people attack me, the envoy of the Lanxiang kingdom? I order you to arrest the two. Otherwise, I'll never let you go." Yi Tian turned away, pretending not to hear him. When he was going to open his mouth again, young Luo Feng swung her arm and shot a silver needle into his body. Ah! At this moment, he felt as if thousands of holes suddenly appeared on the surface of his body, and he cried shrilly and trembled all over. Good. Very good, it seems that you've forgotten the rule. I will report this to our emperor and apply for a punishment on the Tianyan kingdom as soon as I return. The envoy thought young Luo Feng would surely be terrified by his words, but she still smiled lazily and leisurely, a wicked smile hovering over her lips. Can you prove that I attacked you first? Young Luo Feng spread her hands. It's obvious that you challenged me because you thought I was weak. I didn't accept it, but you still attacked me. I just tried to protect myself. Staring at the girl's cheeky face, the envoy was so angry. How could she lie with such an unblushing face? When did he challenge her? And when did he attack her? How could she just call white black? Hearing this, the people present, who had been annoyed by the envoy, all echoed. Exactly, you challenged Miss Yun first and we can all testify that she is innocent. You wanted to bully Miss Yun because you thought she was just a little girl. But you didn't expect that she wasn't a pushover that you couldn't handle. Tut, the Lanxiang kingdom's envoy was so shameless. He bullied a little girl and still has the nerve to say something like this. Chapter 930, Envoys of Another Country 5. The envoy almost vomited a mouthful of blood. Who on earth was shameless? Who on earth called white black? He trembled all over and angrily pointed at young Luo Feng. The silver needles in my body can prove what you said was false. You will surely be chased and killed by all the kingdoms for applying such cruel means to me. Feeling that the needles were moving inside his body, the envoy broke into a cold sweat and turned pale with pain. Silver needle. Young Luo Feng raised her eyebrows. What silver needle? I know nothing about it. How could this woman just deny what she had done? The envoy stood up from the ground, gnashing his teeth. Fine, it doesn't matter whether you admit it or not. I'll find a physician to check it and prove what you did to me. At that time, no one can save you. I don't mind seeing you out if you want to go. Young Luo Feng gave a wicked smile, suddenly appeared behind him, and kicked his butt. His body immediately flew into the air and heavily fell to the ground outside the door. Everyone heard a great crashing sound. Seeing this scene, all the people of the Tianyan kingdom felt extremely delighted. Didn't you just hold your head high and despise our Tianyan kingdom? Now someone gave you a good lesson. These arrogant idiots really needed a lesson. Seeing the Lanxiang kingdom people leave, Yi Jingchen turned his eyes to young Luo Feng with a worried look. Feng, I saw you shoot silver needles into his body. Is it all right? Of course, he wasn't worried about the envoy. Instead, he was worried that what young Luo Feng had done might be found out and cause her to be punished. Looking at Yi Jingchen's worried face, young Luo Feng shrugged. I knew what I was doing. Those silver needles are condensed from my spiritual energy. They will bring him pain every day and night, but no one can find them in his body. Sure enough, after leaving the Tianyan kingdom, the envoy found numerous physicians to treat him, but everyone told him that he was quite well. Therefore, no one believed what he had been suffering and he could only swallow it. Disturbed by the Lanxiang kingdom people, both the hosts and guests were no longer in the mood to celebrate. After bidding farewell to the guests, young Luo Feng and Zhen Fengling walked to the backyard with Yun Xiao. Seeing young Luo Feng left, Lin Ruobai hurriedly followed her. She finally found her master and would never allow herself to be dumped again. Brother, they left. Looking at their receding figures, Sha Chu bit her lips. Shall we follow them? Xuanhuan nodded. Miss Yun is very important in the Yi family. If she can help us, the Sha family will definitely become prosperous. I can't give up this chance anyway. His impudence was a real eye-opener. They had just bullied Lin Ruobai, but now they wanted to ask her master for help. Was that possible? Unfortunately, Xuanhuan and Sha Chu didn't consider this and hurried to follow them. The night was silent. Young Luo Feng and Yun Xiao walked side by side on the backyard trail. Watched from a distance, the two who stood side by side was as beautiful as a painting, so stunningly beautiful. Suddenly, two figures jumped out from the side, stood in their way, and made them stop. Chapter 931. Envoys of Another Country 6. Miss Yun, Xuanhuan smiled sheepishly. I'm Miss Lin's friend. I heard she came here to find her master and tried to help her, but what a coincidence that Miss Yun happens to be her master. Lin Ruobai was silently following young Luo Feng and Yun Xiao behind and appreciating the painting-like perfect couple, but unexpectedly, the atmosphere that she carefully protected was ruined by that bastard Shaohui. She immediately got angry. Before she scolded him, young Luo Feng's lazy voice had rung in the dark night. Tell me what you want. Xuanhuan's eyes slightly brightened. Miss Yun, our Sha family is engaged in the business of medicinal materials. I heard that the Yi family has a medicinal materials trading company. May we sell our medicinal materials to your trading company? Give me some samples of your medicinal materials, young Luo Feng said, frowning. Xuanhuan was quite excited. He hastily took out the medicinal materials he had with him and respectfully offered them to young Luo Feng. Miss Yun, these are the samples of the medicinal materials our Sha family produces. Not taking them, young Luo Feng just coldly glanced at the medicinal materials in his hands. Her gorgeous face was glowing with a faint sheen under the moonlight. The Yi family's medicinal materials trading firm has a high standard on the quality of medicinal materials. The quality of your medicinal materials is too poor, so we don't need them. Xuanhuan became anxious. He hurriedly turned to Lin Ruobai and begged, Miss Lin, I brought you to the Yi family and helped you find your master. Would you please plead with her for me? Lin Ruobai cast a contemptuous glance at him and sneered, "It's only because you brought me to my master that I didn't ask my master to drive you out of the Yi family. How can you dream to sell these shoddy goods to the Yi family?" She was enraged at the thought that this jerk had ruined the beautiful scene of master and her lover. "Miss Lin, though the quality of these medicinal materials is not very good, they can still heal and save people. Why can't you intercede for me? It is my decision, and no one can change my mind." Yun Luofeng narrowed her eyes and cast a bossy glance at Xuanhuan. "Even if Xiaobai intercedes for you, I won't accept such a ridiculous request." "Miss Yun." Seeing Yun Luofeng was going to leave, Xuanhuan hurriedly came forward and tried to grab her hand. However, before his hand touched her sleeves, a powerful aura suddenly struck at him from the side and slammed his body away. Poof! Spitting a mouthful of blood, Xuanhuan awkwardly fell to the ground. "Brother." Xia Chu's little face turned pale, and she quickly ran up to Xuanhuan, sobbing, "They won't agree to use our medicinal materials, so brother, let's go back. It's easy for those people in our family to order us to do this. Why don't they come to complete this impossible mission themselves?" "Chewer." Xuanhuan coughed and got up from the ground, "You know what an awkward position we are in the Xia family. I can't go back before I get the Yi family's help. Even if they went back, they would only face those people's scorn and sarcasm. Unless he could bring them the chance of cooperation with the Yi family." "I'll handle this," Yun Xiao said in a low voice. His voice was magnetic, low and fine-sounding. "Okay." Yun Luofeng didn't ask him what he was going to do to them, because it was none of her business no matter what happened to Xuanhuan and Xia Chu. Chapter 932, Yun Xiao left 1. The next day, in the morning. As soon as Yun Luofeng opened her eyes, she saw an affectionate pair of eyes. Though the man was handsome and cold, he always treated her so tenderly. "You've woken up." Yun Xiao put his arm around her waist. "I have something to tell you. I may be away for some time, and you can wait for me in the Yi family. I'll be back soon." With Zhen Fengling's protection in the Yi family, she would be very safe. That was why Yun Xiao could leave reassured. "You won't wait for grandfather?" Yun Luofeng asked, raising her eyebrows. Yun Xiao paused. "If nothing else, I'll be back before they come here. If I don't come back to you soon, don't worry about me." "Yun Xiao, what are you going to do?" Yun Luofeng frowned slightly, a worried look in her wicked eyes. Yun Xiao pondered. Bai Su is a disaster waiting to happen. I can't rest easy if he is still alive. Wait for me in the Yi family, and I'll be back soon. Okay. She would never stop him from doing anything he wanted to do, for she had given him all her trust. "I'll give you a month, and if you don't come back in a month, I'll go looking for you." Yun Luofeng raised her eyes, a resolute gleam in her dark eyes. Even if she didn't know where Yun Xiao was, she would travel across the continent to find him. Yun Xiao took a final look at Yun Luofeng, his eyes filled with profound love for her, and finally he turned away. In the blink of an eye, the cold black-robed man had disappeared before her and left her in deep sadness. Squeak. The door was pushed open by a hand. Zhen Fengling, dressed in red, walked into the room. She looked at Yun Luofeng and sighed, "Has Shower left?" Yun Luofeng nodded slightly, "He has something to do, so he will be away for some time." Fenger, as if perceiving Yun Luofeng's worries, Zhen Fengling slowly walked up to her, stroked her back with her slender fingers and said with a smile, "Don't worry. I think Shower can handle it. He'll come back to you safe and sound." Not speaking, Yun Luofeng silently gazed at the direction Yun Xiao left, and a strange light flashed through her eyes. "Yun Xiao, I will give you a month. If you don't come back to me in a month, I will go and find you, wherever you are." Perhaps Yun Luofeng was too confident about Yun Xiao's strength. Though she thought he would come back in a few days, she had no news from him over half a month later, and even Qin Yuan had disappeared without saying goodbye. There was a faint uneasiness rising in her heart, and as the time went by, the uneasiness increased. However, during her uneasy waiting, there came a good news. Yun Luo and her other family had finally arrived at the Yi family. Hearing the news, Yun Luofeng hurried to the city gate to welcome them. When she gazed at the familiar faces, all kinds of feelings welled up in her heart. With a ruddy face, Yun Luo was still full of energy. Apparently, he really enjoyed his life. Second uncle stood next to Ningxin behind him. Compared with 1 year ago, Yun Qingya's temperament became more aloof and unique. Wearing a robe the same color as the crescent moon, he looked like a banished immortal standing in the moonlight, unearthly but gorgeous. Ningxin stood beside him like an adorable little bird. The moment she saw Luo Feng, a sweet smile appeared on her beautiful face. Xiao Feng, it's been a long time. Chapter 933, Yun Xiao left too. Master. Yi Ling strode forward, flicked his sleeves, half knelt before Luo Feng and said respectfully, I have brought the steel core here. From now on, we'll follow you and fight on the battlefield. Miss, Qingyun came out with a smile, I have brought the raging flame core here. Miss, we will always back you. At this moment, all the members of the two corps got on their knees, and their voices rang throughout the streets of the imperial city. We are willing to follow Master and fight until we die. Since Luo Feng changed them from trashes to powerful martial masters, they had been determined to fight for her in the rest of their lives and never shrink back. Had it not been for her, they would still have lived a miserable life. She had given them dignity and the status they had today. It was their honor to fight with her on the battlefield and even die for her. Jun Fengling looked at those members in astonishment, her attractive slanted eyes full of shock. It was true that many people would die for their masters, but no one would regard death as an honor. However, she could see from their faces that they really took it as an honor to die for Luo Feng on the battlefield. This girl, how did she train such a loyal group of subordinates? It seems that you've worked hard these days and have made good progress. Luo Feng gently stroked her chin, and examined the members of the corps with a special gleam in her eyes. Yi Ling, have you become a sky-level low-rank spirit cultivator? Yi Ling touched his head and laughed. I was just lucky, I got a good chance, with which I managed to become a sky-level spirit cultivator by a fluke. Not bad, keep it up. Luo Feng raised her eyebrows and looked around the crowd with a confident look. Now that you've come here, you can start a new chapter in your lives here as led by me. As long as you can bear hardship, I will surely bring you a bright future on this continent of no return. Hearing her words, all the people were excited, and their breathing quickened. Then the girl's inspiring voice slowly rang again. When we were on the Long Xia continent, our Yun family used to be small, weak and vulnerable. But now, who on the Long Xia continent would dare to offend the Yun family? Indeed, the Yun family used to be so weak that anyone could trample on it. Had it not been for the sudden appearance of Luo Feng, the Yun family would not become the great power it was today that no one dared to offend. And all of you have played a great role in it. Upon hearing this, the people looked more excited. Was Master telling them that they had contributed a lot to the Yun family's growth? For a loyal subordinate, no prize was better than their master's praise. Then her exciting voice sounded again. But it's far from being enough to only conquer the Long Xia continent. I want to stand at the top of the world. Are you willing to stand there together with me? Yes, we are. The excited voices resounded through the sky. They believed that as long as they faithfully followed Luo Feng, someday all of them would become invincibly powerful. Good, very good. Now the Tianyan kingdom where we stay is the weakest kingdom on this continent. Take a rest first, and then follow me to conquer the continent. If it was before, Luo Feng would not meddle in it. Yes, the Tianyan kingdom was the weakest, so what? What did it have to do with her? However, the Lanxiang kingdom had offended her. She believed that if she didn't prepare in advance, she would surely receive revenge from the Lanxiang kingdom in the coming days. So, she'd better take the initiative to gain the upper hand. Chapter 934, Yun Xiao left 3. Master, we're willing to follow you and conquer the continent of no return. Yes, their target was not just a small kingdom but the whole continent. In today's world, only Luo Feng dared to say this. This girl was unruly and domineering. Even if God offended her, she would fight against God, let alone the people on this continent. Jun Fengling finally understood why she had so many loyal subordinates, because every word she said could easily arouse their emotions and made people believe her unconditionally. Thinking of this, she turned her eyes to the girl standing in the crowd. She looked strikingly beautiful in her snow-white robe. With an arrogant look, she stood in the breeze, releasing a proud and domineering aura. She never belonged to a little pond, and as long as her time came, she would roam in the boundless sea where she really belonged. This was her destiny. Zhen Fengling felt lucky that her son met young Luo Feng in the vast sea of people, and gained her love. Where is my grandson-in-law's mother? Yun Luo looked around with his eyes wide open. Before he came here, he had heard that Yun Xiao's mother was still alive, so the first person he wanted to meet here was her. Master Yun. Zhen Fengling smiled and walked up to him. I am Yun Xiao's mother. I should thank you for raising such an excellent granddaughter so that I can have such a perfect daughter-in-law. Of course, Yun Luo said proudly. If he had a tail, he would have stuck up his tail high into the sky. My granddaughter is the best girl in the world. Fortunately, he didn't have a tail. As if feeling Yun Luo Feng's reproachful eyes, Yun Luo coughed and tried to keep a low profile. Actually, I liked Yun Xiao very much the first moment I saw him, and I had long been planning to make him my grandson-in-law. Yun Xiao's mother, now that we're both here, why don't we hold a wedding for them? Then I won't need to worry about them anymore. By the way, where is Yun Xiao? Yun Luo Feng's face darkened and she sighed. Yun Xiao is away and it might take him some time to come back. We can hold their wedding after he comes back. Oh, I see, Yun Luo said in a downcast voice. Then we'll have to wait a few days more. Anyway, the wedding cannot be delayed once again. Let's hold it as soon as Yun Xiao comes back. That would be the best. Finding the topic they were both interested in, Zhen Fengling and Yun Luo smiled at each other with pleasure. Shower also said that he wanted to hold the wedding as soon as you came here. Now we are all here, it's just the right time to do it. Zhen Fengling smiled and walked up to Yun Luo. From now on, we are one family. Please make the Yi family your home. We're really glad to live with you. Then the two persons, who couldn't wait to see their children get married, began to discuss the details of the wedding as if there was no one else present. Yun Luo Feng slightly raised the corners of her mouth and looked up into the blue sky, a worried look in her eyes. Yun Xiao, when will you come back? After a long discussion, Yun Luo finally went to the Yi family with the others. To Yun Luo Feng's surprise, Yun Luo hit it off with Yi Tian, the Yi family's old diehard, and the two soon became tea friends and enjoyed tea together every day, regretting they hadn't met earlier. Due to this, Yun Luo Feng suffered a great loss. The spiritual teas stored in her space ring were almost all exhausted. Especially Yi Tian, compared with the stingy Yun Luo, he was so generous as to treat his guests with the spiritual tea. The Yi family had to receive guests every day recently, and even the emperor had visited the Yi family several times, just to take a sip of the spiritual tea. Chapter 935. Yun Xiao left for. That night. The night was as cool as water. After returning to her room, Yun Luo Feng closed the door and called Hua Huo via soul communication. After quite a while, Hua Huo, sleepy-eyed, pushed the door and entered. Master, what happened? Hua Huo, Yun Luo Feng said with a serious look, we're leaving the Yi family tonight. Ah. Hua Huo paused and looked at Yun Luo Feng in surprise. Master, you are going to leave here? Yes, I've been getting increasingly upset lately, and I feel that Yun Xiao must have had an accident. So, I have to leave here to find him. Though the 1-month period that they had set hadn't expired, she could not wait any longer. She would go out to look for him anyway. Master, are you going to run away from home? Aren't you going to say goodbye to the Yi family people? They wouldn't let me go if they knew it, Yun Luo Feng said, raising her eyebrows, so I'll just leave them a letter. Okay, Hua Huo said solemnly, I'll follow you wherever you go. Then let's set out now. Yun Luo Feng slightly narrowed her eyes. Yun Xiao, you must wait for me. No matter where you are, I will find you. But, Master, the continent is so large. Do you know where to find him? Hua Huo blinked and asked curiously. Yun Luo Feng shook her head. I don't know, but I think I can find him by following my feeling. I won't stop until I find him. Be it over the sky or under the ground, I'll search every corner of the world. As Yun Luo Feng had made up her mind, Hua Huo said nothing more. She quietly walked to Yun Luo Feng and looked up at her beautiful and resolute face. Master, let's go. Yun Luo Feng had put her luggage into the space ring, so they went straight out without packing up. Taking a final look at the Yi residence, young Luo Feng turned around and walked into the misty night. The next day, a shrill cry was heard throughout the Yi family, and everyone was startled and rushed into young Luo Feng's room. Inside the room, Lin Ruobai was crying bitterly, holding a letter in her hand. Master, you promised me you'd never desert me again, but now you forgot me again. Why didn't you take me with you? Lin Ruobai seemed to be extremely sad, and tears kept running down from her eyes. Jun Fengling was stunned and rushed to take the letter from Lin Ruobai's hand. After she read it, she could not help but sigh. Junior, did Feng say where she was going? Yi Jingchen asked, his eyes full of worry. Jun Fengling gave a wry smile. She said she was going to find Xiao and asked us not to worry about her. She would be back soon. Junior, Yi Jingchen patted Jun Fengling's back and tried to comfort her. I have just sent people to check. Hua is away too. Though Hua is shy and unsociable, she is quite powerful. With her protection, Fenger will be safe. You can rest reassured. No, Jun Fengling shook her head. I can't rest assured. Brother Yi, please send someone to find them. These two really gave her a headache. Alright, Yi Jingchen said tenderly, I'll send all our guards to search for them. You can take a rest. I'll take care of things here. Chapter 936, Yun Xiao's Whereabouts 1. The Xuanhuan Valley. The white fog swirled around it and made it look ethereal. A group of white-clad maids lightly walked into the pavilion and placed fruit trays onto the stone table. In the pavilion, a white-robed man turned to the gorgeous girl sitting beside him and slightly raised the corners of his mouth. You the ancestor of our Xuanhuan Valley, foretold that today a man would appear in the Xuanhuan Mountains, who would become the king of the continent, so we must establish a close relationship with him. For the sake of the Xuanhuan Valley, I'm asking you to sacrifice yourself. The gorgeous woman paused, a dim light in her beautiful eyes. Father, that young lord remains unconscious. What should I do? The man smiled. According to our ancestors' prophecy, he'll wake up sooner or later. How can he become the king of the world if he remains unconscious? Besides, I want to hold a wedding for you and him first. What has been done cannot be undone. It'll be too late for him to change anything after he wakes up. He didn't mind sacrificing his only daughter for the sake of the Xuanhuan Valley. Nothing was more important to him than profits. Yes, I see. Hanyu raised her gorgeous face, her face resolute. She didn't mind marrying a stranger if it could revitalize the Xuanhuan Valley. Besides, the man was not only handsome but also had great potential. It was not a bad choice to marry him. But father, Hanyu rolled her eyes and asked, the young lord is still unconscious, so I don't know whether he has been married or not. If he already has a wife, do I have to be his concubine? The man looked at Hanyu and smiled faintly. I don't know whether he has a fiance or not, but I can tell that he is still a virgin. If you become his first woman, you'll always have an important position in his heart. Hanyu was relieved when she heard this. She smiled and stood up. Father, I'm going back to my room. Then she turned away and walked slowly toward the backyard. Looking at her receding figure, the man smiled. Instead of returning to her room, Hanyu walked into a luxurious room. On the big bed in the room, a man lay quietly. He frowned as if suffering a great pain, but even so, no one could ignore his kingly aura. This man, even in the pain, didn't lose his kingly aura. He was so powerful that her heart began to beat violently when she looked at him. Hanyu slowed down and slowly walked toward the man. I don't know what happened to you and why you became like this. Even our physicians can't find out the cause of your illness. She smiled softly and reached out her slender, jade-like fingers to caress his face, but don't worry. I'll wake you up. A man like you shouldn't be stuck like this forever. Her hand was about to fall on the man's handsome face. At that time, with a boom, a strong spiritual energy came out from the man's body and instantly slammed Hanyu's body away. Poof! Hanyu spat out a mouthful of blood and looked up at the man in shock only to find that he was still lying in bed, unconscious and motionless. Why did it happen? Chapter 937, Yun Xiao's Whereabouts 2. The man, even unconscious, was still resisting her touch. He didn't even allow her to touch his face. It felt like a virtuous woman trying to guard her chastity for her husband. Miss, what happened? Hearing the noise in the room, the guards guarding outside hurriedly broke into the room. Hanyu quickly wiped the blood from her lower mouth and stood up from the ground, her face as mild and aloof as usual. Nothing happened, I just had a fall. Don't make a fuss. You can leave now. Yes. The guards didn't dare to say anything more, made an obeisance and left. Hanyu didn't want to stay here long. She turned her head and looked at the unconscious man in bed, a complex gleam in her beautiful eyes. She didn't know whether it was right or not to take her father's order. Neither did she know whether she had made a huge mistake to fall in love with this man at first sight. Even if she had, she was willing to continue this mistake. Thinking of this, Hanyu turned around and disappeared into the bright sunshine. In a jungle not far from Xuanhuan Mountain, when young Luo Feng was pushing aside the tangled grasses with her sword, she smelled a faint smell of blood. Master, let me check it. Also smelling it, Hua jumped and quickly disappeared into the distance. After quite a while, her cry of surprise was heard, Master, it's Qin Yuan. He's injured. Qin Yuan. Young Luo Feng was stunned and quickly ran towards her direction. Then she found Qin Yuan, who was lying in a cave, unconscious. It seemed that Qin Yuan had been lying here for a long time and the blood under his body had turned brown. His breathing was so weak that it seemed it could disappear at any moment. Seeing Qin Yuan's condition, young Luo Feng felt her heart miss a beat. Did Yun Xiao really have an accident? She really regretted it. She should not have allowed him to leave alone because she was overconfident in his power. Hua, get out of the way. Young Luo Feng got serious and hurriedly asked Hua to step aside. Then she took a spiritual herb out of the space ring and fed it into Qin Yuan's mouth. However, perhaps because Qin Yuan was too seriously wounded, this spiritual herb didn't work on him. Having no time to think, young Luo Feng took out a handful of spiritual herbs and stuck them into his mouth. Ahem. Choking on the juices from the spiritual herbs, Qin Yuan coughed and slowly opened his eyes, only to see a beautiful and familiar face that was filled with rage, and he was startled. Am I, mistress, why are you here? Qin Yuan had not recovered from his wounds, so his voice was weak and faintly timid. Where is Yun Xiao? Young Luo Feng asked in a cold voice, raising her eyebrows. Qin Yuan gave a wry smile. Several days ago, Master found the whereabouts of Bai Su. We tracked him here and Master had successfully caught him. However, when Master was going to kill him, he suddenly had a breakthrough. The technique Yun Xiao cultivated was a bit special. Every time he had a breakthrough, he would become extremely vulnerable. Who would expect that he had a breakthrough in the fight with Bai Su, which immediately crippled him? Bai Su took the chance to attack and seriously injure him. I tried my best to take Master away and hide in the Xuanhuan Mountains, both of us severely injured. However, unexpectedly, we met the disciples of the Xuanhuan Valley. Chapter 938, Yun Xiao's Whereabouts 3. Those people took Master and drove me away. I couldn't beat them, so I wanted to go back to report to you, but I fainted when I walked here. Then Qin Yuan carefully looked at young Luo Feng. Besides, when I woke up from time to time these days, I overheard some passers-by say that the Xuanhuan Valley's heiress Hanyu was going to marry a man who was picked up by them from Xuanhuan Mountain a few days ago. If I'm not wrong, the man is Master. Young Luo Feng's face darkened, her eyes filled with intense murderous desire, which looked really horrifying. Looking at her black face, for fear that she would misunderstand Yun Xiao, Qin Yuan hurriedly explained, Mistress, this matter has nothing to do with Master. He was in a coma when I left him, and he couldn't wake up so soon. I think they want to force a marriage upon him and rape him. Young Luo Feng's face turned even blacker after hearing Qin Yuan's words. Knowing that he had said something wrong, Qin Yuan tried to explain again, No, I take back what I said. Even if they want to force themselves upon Master, they can't. Unless the Xuanhuan Valley's heiress wants to commit suicide. Master planted a seal into his body just in case. What's this about? Young Luo Feng asked in a low voice. Qin Yuan swallowed hard. With that seal, if a woman wants to do something improper to him when he loses his consciousness, the spiritual energy in his body will automatically strike, leaving no chance to that woman. But of course, it also has a serious consequence. If the seal strikes for too many times, the spiritual energy in his body will go out of control and make him explode. He would rather die with the women who coveted him than leave her any chance. Yuan Shao knew the specialness of his cultivation technique, so he planted the seal into his body long before, in case of the situation today. Mistress, master is really faithful to you. Young Luo Feng looked cold. Why didn't Yuan Shao ever tell me about this? Master doesn't want you to worry about him. He just wants to do everything he can to protect you. Young Luo Feng felt her heart missed a beat. Indeed, Yuan Shao had been staying by her side all these years. This man, who had acquired a sublime status, was willing to reduce himself to dust for her. Qin Yuan, wait here for me. I'll be back soon. Mistress. Seeing Yuan Luo Feng was going to leave, Qin Yuan became anxious. You can't go there. They're more powerful than you. If anything goes wrong, how can master survive? Young Luo Feng paused and said without looking back, over the years, it's always been Yuan Shao who protected me. He has done so much for me, but I've never done anything for him. So, this time, let me protect him. I will take him back even at the expense of my own life. She wouldn't mind giving them a bloodbath. Without stopping, young Luo Feng strode away, her steps firm and stable, her face stunningly beautiful. The Xuanhuan Valley was decorated with lanterns and streamers and permeated with a jubilant atmosphere. Today, the Xuanhuan Valley's heiress was going to be married, and all the powers had come to congratulate her, all with a polite, hypocritical smile on their faces. Boom. At this moment, a loud noise came from outside the valley and attracted everyone's attention. Chapter 939, Yuan Shao's Whereabouts 4. Who dares to make trouble at my daughter's wedding? Valley Master asked in a cold voice, his face darkened. As soon as he stopped, the bodies of the guards guarding the gate of the Xuanhuan Valley were suddenly thrown in from outside. Their bodies scattered on the ground and soon dyed the floor red. At the same time, a girl in a blood-stained robe slowly walked in with a little girl, her eyes wicked, aggressive, and filled with intense killing intent. Who are you? How dare you do this here? Valley Master cried out loud. The girl raised her eyebrows and slowly turned her eyes to Hanyu, who was in a bright red bridal gown. Where is Yuan Shao? Yuan Shao. Stunned, everyone looked at each other in astonishment. Valley Master's face turned blacker. Miss, today is a big day for my daughter. If you want to attend the wedding banquet, you will be greatly welcomed. But if you come here to make trouble, then don't blame me for being rude. By the way, who is Yuan Shao? I don't know any person called this name. Young Luo Feng answered expressionlessly, Yuan Shao is my fiance, the man you picked up in the Xuanhuan Mountains the other day. Upon hearing this, Hanyu turned pale and looked at young Luo Feng in astonishment with her beautiful eyes. She was the young lord's fiance. Valley Master's eyes turned grim. I don't know what you're talking about. I found that young lord lying on the side of the road unconscious, so I picked him up. Last night, he woke up and proposed to my daughter. He never mentioned he had a fiancé. Really? Young Luo Feng slightly narrowed her eyes. If he has woken up, why isn't he here? How can a bridegroom be absent from his wedding? Valley Master looked a bit embarrassed. The man was still in a coma, and if he was carried here, people would think that the Xuanhuan Valley's heiress couldn't find a decent man to marry and had to force a man to marry her, taking advantage of his perilous state. So, he cleared his throat and continued, Miss, although he has regained consciousness, he doesn't feel very well and can't come to attend the wedding ceremony. However, he had told me that today a woman would come here to make trouble. That woman has been cheekily pestering him, and he had been extremely vexed by her. This woman he talked about must be you. For all the guests, Valley Master had a good reputation, so they believed him and began to point fingers at young Luo Feng. Those people's eyes were filled with contempt. Hua Huo got angry and wanted to spit fire, but young Luo Feng stopped her. She slightly lowered her eyes and asked through soul communication, Xiao Mo, do you have any way to help me become a god-level spirit cultivator in an instant? Xiao Mo pondered. Yes, but the cost is great. With this method, you can become a god-level spirit cultivator immediately, and unlike those who made a breakthrough with the help of external forces, your foundation will be solid. But you still have to be prepared for the bad consequence. Whatever the consequence is, I am willing to bear it. Young Luo Feng raised her eyebrows and said solemnly. She didn't even ask Xiao Mo what the consequence would be. Because no matter what happened, she would take it on her own. Then I will pass on that power to you. Xiao Mo's voice sounded somewhat helpless. He knew that no matter how he tried to persuade her, she would not change her mind. In this case, he could only try his best to help her. Boom. Suddenly, a powerful force entered her soul, and she broke through in an instant. There was an immeasurably vast difference between the power of a god-level spirit cultivator and a sky-level one. Only when you entered this realm, you would know how weak a sky-level cultivator was. Chapter 940, Yuan Xiao's Whereabouts 5. If a god-level spirit cultivator's power was an ocean, then that of a sky-level one was only a small puddle. The difference was simply immeasurable. What was going on here? The guests were all stunned and stared at Luo Feng in astonishment. Why did she suddenly break through, and become a powerful god-level spirit cultivator? Becoming a god-level spirit cultivator at such a young age, she had even exceeded the talent of the heiress of the Xuanhuan Valley. Let me ask you one last time, where is Yuan Xiao? Luo Feng raised her head, and the killing intent in her eyes grew more intense. Valley Master's face darkened and he ordered coldly, "Guards, come on, kill her." In a moment, the guards of the Xuanhuan Valley all took out their weapons and rushed towards Luo Feng. Luo Feng clenched her long sword and ran into the crowd like a bolt of lightning. Every time she moved her arms, a bloody head dropped to the ground. Her mind was filled with Qin Yuan's words and the only thing she knew was to kill, kill, and kill. If any woman other than her touched Yuan Xiao, the spiritual energy in his body would automatically strike the woman. If it struck for too many times, he would explode. Qin Yuan's words echoed in her mind and the invisible murderous aura around her began to spread, making the whole courtyard shrouded in an oppressive atmosphere. Anyone who hurts Yuan Xiao shall die. The whole earth was dyed red by blood, and even the sky turned red as if being burned with fire. Soon, all the guards lay in a pool of blood, and then she turned her bloodshot eyes to Valley Master and Hunyu. "You're crazy." The guests, who had been hiding off to the side, couldn't stand her cruelty anymore, and an angry roar went up from the crowd. "Just for a man, you killed so many innocent lives like a beast. Aren't you afraid of hell?" The girl burst into laughter. Her wild laughter echoed throughout the sky. "Hell, why should I fear it?" Yes, for her, hell was unworthy of her fear. She wasn't even afraid of God, so why should she be afraid of hell? The crowd stared at her domineering face, dumbfounded. How bold she was to say such words. Unfortunately, no matter how strong she was only a god-level low-rank spirit cultivator, while Valley Master was a god-level high-rank spirit cultivator. How could she beat him? "You'll regret you said that." Valley Master, his face black with rage, waved his sleeve, and a spiritual energy flew out of it and struck at Luo Feng. Spotting Valley Master's movements, Luo Feng moved her body and dodged it, and the spiritual energy hit the artificial hill behind her and left a big hole in it. Squeak. At this time, a small milk-white hamster secretly climbed onto Valley Master's head, proudly stood on his head to show off his prowess, and then bit his scalp. "Ah!" A shrill voice broke out. Feeling that the hamster's sharp teeth left 2 deep holes on his head, Valley Master waved his hands and tried to catch it. Milk Tea deftly dodged it, jumped to the ground and sneered at Valley Master, "Idiot, you think you can catch me? Tut." Valley Master's face greatly changed and the others also widened their eyes in shock. Did this gold-seeking hamster just speak? Was it a god-level spirit cultivator? It was said that the gold-seeking hamster was a weak spiritual beast, so how could he reach this level? Chapter 941, Dual Cultivation. At the same time, a golden light flashed, and in the blink of an eye, numerous gold-seeking hamsters suddenly appeared in the tidy and clean courtyard. These hamsters all released their auras and startled Valley Master once again. How is it possible? Valley Master retreated a few paces, his voice trembling. Most of these gold-seeking hamsters are sky-level spirit cultivators, and 2 of them are even god-level spirit cultivators. Are these really gold-seeking hamsters? At first, in the hamster tribe, only Milk Tea and the Queen were strong. With the help of medicinal herbs, all the gold-seeking hamsters made progress rapidly, and now most of them had become sky-level spirit cultivators. They were the strongest troop of Yun Luo Feng. Huo, you watch these people with the hamster tribe. No one is allowed to leave without my permission. I'll go find Yun Xiao. Saying this, Yun Luo Feng disappeared instantly, and her white figure flashed away like a phantom. Perhaps out of intuition, she headed for the room where Yun Xiao was in. The moment she pushed the door open, she saw a handsome face. He frowned as if he was suffering a great pain. Master, the effects of his last breakthrough haven't dissipated. If you want to keep him safe and sound, help him assimilate the breakthrough. Otherwise, his life will be endangered. In her soul, Xiao Mo's voice rang. Yun Luo Feng understood what Xiao Mo meant and had been mentally prepared for it, or else she wouldn't have risked her life to forcibly make herself a god-level spirit cultivator in a moment. Yun Xiao, I'm here. She slowly walked to Yun Xiao and gently stroked his handsome face, smiling sweetly. You're a fool. You've done so many things for me, but you never told me about it and didn't let me share it with you. From now on, I will work harder until I can equal you in strength. She leaned over, kissed his cold, thin lips, and gently took off his clothes. As if feeling her breath, he relaxed his tightly knitted brows and the painful look disappeared from his face. Yun Luo Feng didn't notice that at that moment, two faint halos appeared over her and Yun Xiao, and gradually blended into one. Yun Xiao, you. Yun Luo Feng wanted to continue only to find the unconscious man had opened his eyes. When she was about to ask Xiao Mo what was going on, the man under her suddenly turned over and pressed her under his body. The man kissed her lips hard, and the tenderness in his black eyes was replaced by a haze. Yun Luo Feng realized that he hadn't woken up and the effects of his last breakthrough hadn't disappeared. He moved just now because the dual cultivation stimulated his body and aroused his instinctive reaction. Ouch! Feeling a sharp pain on her private parts, Yun Luo Feng fiercely bit Yun Xiao's shoulder. Yun Xiao, get off me! He didn't stop, but his movement became tenderer. Even in a coma, he still intuitively followed her order out of fear that she might be hurt because of his movements. Undeniably, the effect of their first dual cultivation was great. After this vigorous bed exercise, Yun Luo Feng, who had just become a god-level spirit cultivator, broke through again. Chapter 942, It's Just an Arm 1. After a long time, the man on the bed finally stopped and fell asleep with satisfaction. The painful look on his face had disappeared, and a faint smile was hovering on his lips. Yun Luo Feng rubbed her aching body, turned her head to look at the man who was sleeping, and dangerously narrowed her eyes. I'll settle accounts with you after you wake up. Then Yun Luo Feng tried to relax her right arm only to find that her right arm was completely senseless. She froze and asked, Xiao Mo, my hand. Master, this is the consequence of your forced breakthrough. Xiao Mo gave a bitter smile. If it was in the past, he would certainly be ecstatic about Yun Luo Feng and Yun Xiao's dual cultivation. However, after Yun Luo Feng began to have dual cultivation with Yun Xiao, he kept silent. After all, the price of this dual cultivation was too high. Yun Luo Feng calmly gazed at the sky outside the room, and said with a mild voice, it's just an arm. Compared with Yun Xiao's life, it's not that important. I can accept this. Without the right arm, I can still fight with my left arm. Master. Xiao Mo had mixed feelings. He was literally the matchmaker of the two. If it weren't for him, she would not have saved Yun Xiao. But now, she became disabled in order to save Yun Xiao. Even though her right arm was still there, so what? What was the use of a senseless arm? Xiao Mo, keep it secret. Don't tell Yun Xiao about it. Yun Luo Feng lowered her eyes, and affectionately gazed at Yun Xiao with her dark eyes. She gently stroked his handsome face with her left hand and smiled sweetly. I don't want him to feel guilty. Did she really not mind the fact that her right hand had become senseless? No. Though her right arm was important to her, it was not as important as Yun Xiao. So she didn't regret it. The man in bed seemed to feel something, and his eyes slowly opened. Different from just now, his eyes were no longer hazy, but rather cold. However, when he saw Yun Luo Feng lying beside him, he was stunned. Feng, His deep and hoarse voice was full of disbelief, and his eyes were fixed on Yun Luo Feng's face. You woke up. Raising her eyebrows and smiling, Young Luo Feng turned over and sat on Yuan Xiao's body. With a wicked smile, she pinched his chest hard with her left hand. I never expected that you were so crazy in bed. Yuan Xiao frowned slightly and a series of blurred images flashed through his mind. As his mind became increasingly clear, the blurred images became clear too. Does it ring a bell? Young Luo Feng held her arms across her chest and gazed at the man underneath her with a smile. Tell me, how I should punish you for this. Yuan Xiao finally remembered what happened just now, and his eyes changed. At this time, his expressions kept changing and he no longer looked cold. An excited light flickered through his dark eyes, and he raised his hand and firmly held Young Luo Feng in his arms. You can punish me as much as you like. Candle or whip, anything you pick. The man hugged Young Luo Feng tightly as if trying to make her a part of his body. She had come. She came here to find him and made him a real man. Yuan Xiao had never experienced such joy. Next time, I'll be on top of you. Young Luo Feng pushed Yuan Xiao's chest away, squinted her eyes and said threateningly. Chapter 943, It's just an arm too. Okay, Yuan Xiao's voice was hoarse and ambiguous, why don't we try it once again now? You can stay on top this time. Yuan Xiao. A gleam flashed through Young Luo Feng's eyes and as she was going to refute him, he had cupped her face with his hands and sealed her mouth with his cold, thin lips. The whole room was shrouded in a pink, romantic atmosphere. The Xuanhuan Valley. All the guests cowered in a corner, looking in horror at the little girl in the scarlet robe and none of them dared to stand up. Just now, someone of the Xuanhuan Valley tried to catch Huahuo to threaten Young Luo Feng. However, before he could reach Huahuo, he was burned to ashes by the flame she spat out. Yes. Without any extra movement, the little girl spat out a flame towards the god-level low-rank spirit cultivator and killed him in an instant. Therefore, let alone the guests, even Valley Master who was the most powerful one among them, didn't dare to do anything to her. Anyone else? Huahuo stepped on the artificial hill, arrogantly raised her chin and looked down at the crowd. Who else wants to catch me? Come out, I'll leave him a complete body. The crowd shuddered and shrank, trying to hide their presence from her eyes. Huahuo looked around and her eyes rested on Hunyu's fair-skinned face. Like a proud phoenix, she swaggered towards Hunyu. Tut, why do you need a man so desperately, forcing him to marry you when he is in a coma? Hunyu's face changed. I didn't do anything wrong. We're in love with each other. It's you who are trying to break us up. As the Xuanhuan Valley's heiress, she enjoyed a noble status. How could she allow anyone to humiliate her like this? Even at the expense of her life, she would never admit that she tried to rape a man while he was unconscious. It was not her concern whether Young Luo Feng could find the man or not. Even if she found him, in his current state, he couldn't say anything. At that time, the public opinion would only be in favor of her. In love with you? Can you tell me who's in love with you? Suddenly, a lazy and wicked voice came from behind. Then, another cold voice rang, piercing into her heart and making her shudder. Not me. When she heard Young Luo Feng's voice, her face didn't change. However, the next moment, her face turned ghastly pale and she turned her head to look at the two slowly coming from the direction of the setting sun. The afterglow of the sunset poured down into every corner of the Xuanhuan Valley. In the light of the sunset, the girl's snow-white robe glowed with a faint sheen. With a freezing aura, the cold-faced man closely followed her steps. His icy eyes were as sharp as daggers, as if they were able to kill. How can you? Hunyu covered her mouth in shock, her beautiful little face ghastly pale. Wasn't he unconscious? Why did he suddenly appear here? Yuan Xiao, the white-clad girl raised the corners of her lips, this woman almost became your wife. Don't you want to say something to her? His wife? Yuan Xiao frowned. All he knew was that he had been taken away by the people of the Xuanhuan Valley, and he had no idea what had happened next. Of course, he didn't know the Xuanhuan Valley people planned to make him marry Hunyu when he was in a coma. Chapter 944, Someone of the Xuanhuan Valley 1. I'll only have you as my wife. The man raised his cold face. If anyone else dares to pretend to be my wife, she'll have one and only end. Death. The murderous aura surged out of his body. His black figure flashed and the next moment, he appeared in front of Hanyu. A sharp thorn suddenly appeared in his hand, and he stabbed it into Hanyu's heart. He would only have Yun Luofeng as his woman. Anyone who annoyed Yun Luofeng would only have one end. Hanyu shuddered, looked down at her broken chest, and stared at Yun Xiao in shock. I saved you. Why did you? Why did you kill me? Until she died, she didn't get an answer from Yun Xiao. She didn't hurt him and she just wanted to become his wife while he was unconscious. Why did he kill her for such a small matter? Bang! Hanyu's body fell to the ground. With her eyes wide open, she died with an everlasting grievance. Ha ha ha. Seeing his daughter die, Valley Master didn't feel sad but laughed wildly. You fools! We Xuanhuan Valley used to be so strong that all the kingdoms united together couldn't defeat us, but now we are reduced to the current situation. Do you know why? Valley Master sneered. That's because our powerful masters have all left here, including my father, who was already a sage-level spirit cultivator. But my father placed a seal into Yuer's body. If she died, he will appear. I never expected that you would dare to kill Yuer. That was why Valley Master hadn't stopped Yun Xiao just now. It was worth it to sacrifice a daughter for the revitalization of the Xuanhuan Valley. It was a pity that the one who his ancestors asked them to fawn on had become the Xuanhuan Valley's enemy. Since Yun Xiao couldn't become his man, then he could only kill him before he grew up. Who killed my granddaughter? As soon as Valley Master finished, an old voice suddenly came from the sky. At the same time, a powerful pressing power came from above, and all the guests who came to attend the wedding had knelt on the floor and couldn't move. Master, flee! Hua cried out in alarm. Her body had turned stiff under the pressing power and her eyes were filled with fear. This man is very strong. Run! Milk tea, Hua, go back and wait for me. Looking at the hamsters that clearly couldn't resist the pressure, Yun Luofeng waved her hand and took them all back. Looking at Yun Luofeng's movements, Yun Xiao frowned. From what he knew of Yun Luofeng, she used to use her right hand, but now she used her left hand when taking back the hamsters. Why? Unfortunately, Yun Xiao didn't have the time to think about it. The old man in the sky had begun to attack Yun Luofeng. He rushed toward Yun Luofeng, held her waist and moved a few steps sideways with her. Yun Xiao looked deep into Yun Luofeng's eyes and said, "Wait for me off to the side. I'll deal with him." Then he let go of the girl in his arms, and a deadly light flashed through his cold, dark eyes. Father, Valley Master glared at Yun Luofeng and Yun Xiao, and turned to the old man. This man is the person in our ancestors' prophecy. As the former master of the Xuanhuan Valley, how could the old man not know their ancestors' prophecy? His aloof eyes turned to Yun Xiao, and he pondered for a while. He is that man. In that case, the man can't die yet. But he'll be a trouble here. Let me lock him up first. Chapter 945. Someone of the Xuanhuan Valley too. With that in mind, the old man placed his finger on a random spot in the air. Suddenly, a black hole appeared in front of Yun Xiao, which grew larger and larger until it swallowed him up. Yun Xiao. Yun Luofeng rushed up to catch him, but before her hand reached him, he had disappeared before her eyes. Where did you take Yun Xiao? Yun Luofeng clenched her fists tightly and stared at the old man coldly, her eyes sparkling with anger. Ha ha. Before the old man answered her, Valley Master rushed to say, "Your man has been swallowed up by my father's black hole. He has completely disappeared from the world. You'll never see him again. Ha ha. He has completely disappeared from the world. You'll never see him again." Yun Luofeng's pupils suddenly constricted. All the noises around her seemed to be gone and only these words echoed in her mind. Yun Xiao had disappeared. He had left her forever. No. A blood-curdling cry resounded throughout the sky. The girl's eyes turned red, and spiritual energies ceaselessly surged out of her body. She stared at the old man's wrinkled face. "I want all of you to die with Yun Xiao. Even at the cost of her life." At this moment, no one noticed that the spiritual energy surging out of her body didn't dissipate in the air, but was absorbed by something unknown. Yun Xiao. In her mind, except for Yun Xiao's face, there was only one thing left, to kill. She wanted everyone here to die with him. Once again, blood had reddened the whole courtyard. Even the guests couldn't survive young Luo Feng's wrath and fell into a pool of blood before they could call for help. The old man looked indifferently at the girl who was fighting madly with her sword, and a sarcastic smile flashed through his eyes. Then, he dove sharply, landed in front of young Luo Feng, and hit her chest hard. For an instant, young Luo Feng felt a burning pain in her insides, as if she had been burned alive, and the pain was simply unbearable. Was this the power of a sage-level spirit cultivator? How could she face the spirit cultivators above sage levels if she couldn't even defeat a sage-level spirit cultivator? But she didn't want to throw in the towel. She didn't want to die here. At least not before she avenged Yuan Shao. Do you hate? A voice that seemed to come from the sky rang in her soul. Hate? How could she not hate? I can help you deal with these people, but as a condition, you need to bring me up. Young Luo Feng was stunned. Before she figured out what had happened, countless vines suddenly appeared on the ground. These vines quickly grew towards the old man as if they were alive. The old man stared in astonishment, wondering what had happened. While he was stunned, the vines popping up from underground had fastened his body firmly and were tearing at his limbs. Ah! The tearing pain made him scream, his face turned pale with pain, and cold sweat rolled down from his forehead. What are these things? Valley Master was completely stunned. He gaped at the vines that had tied up his father, his eyes glazed. Who are you? Young Luo Feng asked in a low voice, as the red light in her eyes dissipated. Why are you helping me? Chapter 946, Changes of the Tree Seed 1. Not long ago, you took me away from the auction house and accidentally dripped a drop of your blood onto my root, so I began to produce consciousness. With that drop of blood, we've made a contract, so you can't die. The auction house. Young Luo Feng paused. Are you the tree seed? At the auction, Xiao Mo told her that the tree seed was very special, but she didn't expect a tree could have consciousness. I finally got a chance to contact you today, and soon my consciousness will disappear, so let me finish, the voice sounded again. Master, you must bring me up. After you become a sage-level spirit cultivator, you can go to other continents, where you will come across countless risks. But if you take me with you, I can help you. Bring it up. What did it mean? When Yun Luo Feng wanted to continue to ask it things, her soul shook and she could feel that the consciousness disappeared. Yun Luo Feng, what is this monster you summoned? Valley Master wielded his sword to cut the vines, only to find that these vines were as hard as diamond and too hard to cut off, no matter how hard he tried. The old man was almost suffocated by them, his eyes wide open and bloodshot, and his limbs seemed like they would be torn off at any moment. Where is Yuan Shao? Losing her mind at first, Yun Luo Feng was unable to think rationally. But now she could tell that Valley Master must be lying after she came to her senses. Yuan Shao must still be alive. Ha ha. Hearing her words, the old man laughed sarcastically and said in his old, dry voice, if you don't let me go, you'll never see him again in your life. Really? Yun Luo Feng raised her eyebrows. Little tree, tear him apart. Taking her order, the vines began to pull harder on the old man's limbs. The old man hurriedly shouted because the vines were going to tear his limbs off his body. Stop, stop now. I promise you I'll let you see him again as soon as you let me go. At this point, the old man finally conceded and yielded to Yun Luo Feng. Go with the flow. As for revenge, there will be plenty of opportunities for me. As soon as the old man conceded, he felt that the vines tearing at him relaxed, and he heaved a sigh of relief. Tear. However, the next minute, a space-tearing noise was heard. The old man suddenly froze and raised his eyes. When he saw a hand reaching out of the black hole, his eyes suddenly widened. Impossible, this is impossible. His face turned ghastly pale, and he gaped in horror at the cold-looking man who had climbed out of the black hole. Fenger. Ignoring the old man, Yuan Shao rushed to Yun Luo Feng, a worried look in his dark eyes. The old man's space was too hard, so it took me some time to tear it open. Have you been injured? The old man almost spat blood when he heard his words. Where the hell was this guy from? He had locked him up in the black hole, but he had torn it. Was this guy really just a sage-level spirit cultivator? Yun Xiao, are you all right? No one knew how afraid she was when she saw Yun Xiao disappear. She never wanted to go through that fear again. Young Luo Feng hugged him tightly with her left hand, and stuck her head into his arms, a happy smile on her lips. Thank God, he came back safely. Chapter 947, Changes of the Tree Seed 2. Suddenly, Yun Xiao took Yun Luo Feng's right hand, frowning, "What's wrong with your right hand?" Yun Luo Feng paused. She was so excited about Xiao's return that she forgot to hide her disabled right hand. Besides, as discreet and cautious as Yun Xiao was, she couldn't hide it from his eyes for long. Thinking of this, Yun Luo Feng felt a little guilty. She looked at the dumbfounded Valley Master and rolled her eyes. "He maimed my right hand." Valley Master was still shocked by Yun Xiao's return. Hearing her words, he stumbled and almost fell to the ground. Nonsense. Valley Master was trembling with rage. He didn't even touch her. When did he maim her? Yun Xiao, however, believed every single word Yun Luo Feng said. He turned his cold eyes to Valley Master, and a killing aura spread throughout the Xuanhuan Valley. Valley Master died miserably. The scene was so appalling that one could hardly bear the sight of it. Before he had the time to call for help, he had been cut into pieces by Yun Xiao, dying without a complete body. Yun Luo Feng smiled at Valley Master, who had been tortured to death, and the smile on her face spread. She felt sorry for him, but Yun Xiao was too important to her. Yun Xiao would be devastated if he learned that she maimed her own right hand to save him. It would be better to pass the buck to Xuanhuan Valley. That was the punishment for their coveting of Yun Xiao. Yun Luo Feng relaxed because Yun Xiao had returned safely. Then she sat on the ground with her knees crossed and put her consciousness into the God Code space. She wanted to know what had happened to the tree seed. At this moment, in the land of God Code space, Xiaomo and Huahuo both stared ahead with gaping eyes, as if they had seen a monster. Yun Luo Feng followed their eyes only to see a chubby baby in a Chinese-style chest covering sitting on the ground. Its face was blurred and couldn't be seen clearly. Giggling with joy, it seemed to be very curious about this new world. And the tree that was planted here before was completely gone. Xiaomo, Huahuo, what's going on? Yun Luo Feng asked. Huahuo shook her head, I don't know. Just a moment ago, with a bang, the tree that tried to eat me exploded and changed into this baby. Yun Luo Feng turned her eyes to Xiaomo again. Coming to his senses with a shudder, Xiaomo said excitedly, Master, we'll make a fortune. This is the legendary tree that can assume a human shape. Though it needs a chance to change into a human being, it will be very powerful once properly cultivated after it takes human shape. Oh, how lucky we are. Yun Luo Feng raised her eyebrows, why can't I see its face? Master, this anthropomorphosis tree has no face or gender. You can set them for it. When it grows up, it will have the face you set for it. Yun Luo Feng gently stroked her chin. What kind of a face did she want the tree seed to have? Suddenly, a cold face popped up in her mind. She wondered whether the baby would grow into a miniature Yun Xiao. As the light flashed in Yun Luo Feng's mind, the little baby's facial features became clear. He smiled brightly and waved his short arms toward Yun Luo Feng, his eyes and nose exactly the same as Yun Xiao's. Chapter 948, Presents from Little Tree 1. Giggle. The chubby baby laughed delightfully. He opened his arms to Yun Luo Feng as if asking her to hold him. Master, this baby was bullying me before he was born, Huahuo said, glaring at the chubby baby. Now, I will teach him a good lesson and let him know he can't bully me again. The chubby baby seemed not to understand what Huahuo was talking about, and he was still giggling, with a bright smile on his ruddy face. Eager to teach him a lesson, Huahuo came up to the chubby baby. However, when she was just about to lift the chubby baby up and give him a good beating, the chubby baby stretched out a little finger and gently touched Huahuo between her eyebrows. Huahuo paused. Before she could figure out what had happened, numerous vines suddenly attacked her from behind and tied her up. Giggle. Seeing Huahuo floundering in the vines, the chubby baby rolled around on the ground and waved his little hands and legs, expressing his inner happiness. It seemed that playing tricks on people was his interest. Yun Luo Feng slowly stepped forward and held the chubby baby up. I'll call you Little Tree from now on. Upon hearing this, Xiao Mo cast a contemptuous glance at young Luo Feng. He knew that his master was lame at naming. No matter Milk Tea or Little Tree, both were terrible names. However, Little Tree liked this name very much. He grinned at young Luo Feng with pleasure, his little hand stroked her face and the smile on his face grew bigger. Xiao Mo's face darkened. What's wrong with this seedling? How could he like such a childish name? Little Tree, let Huo go, young Luo Feng said, raising her eyebrows. Little Tree looked unwillingly at Huo, his mouth puckering, and his eyes gazing at young Luo Feng piteously. She was joking with you and didn't mean to hurt you. Let her go. Hearing this, the smile on Little Tree's face disappeared, and he raised his small hand reluctantly. In an instant, the vines all disappeared. With a bang, Huo fell from the sky and landed on the fertile ground. Master, Huo got up from the ground, glared at Little Tree and turned her eyes to young Luo Feng with an aggrieved look. He bullied me. You can bully him back, young Luo Feng said with an evil smile. I won't stop you. Huo's voice suddenly stopped and she looked so piteous. Though Little Tree just took the shape of a human being, he was more dangerous than any spiritual beast, so she would not be so silly as to provoke him. Giggle. Little Tree laughed defiantly and grimaced at Huo, and she was so angered by his provocation that she almost rushed up to fight with him. Little Tree, however, ignored Huo. His little hand scratched his bottom and, after a while, pulled a fruit out of his butt. The fruit was translucent and shone like a green crystal. With the smell of his butt, he offered the fruit to young Luo Feng as if asking for credit. Master, this is anthropomorphosis fruit. Xiao Mo was quite pleased to see the green fruit offered by Little Tree. If Milk Tea eats this fruit, he can take the shape of a human being. Anthropomorphosis fruit. Young Luo Feng raised her eyebrows and turned to Milk Tea. Under her stare, Milk Tea felt his hair stand on end. He drew a long face and begged, Master, may I refuse to eat this thing taken out of Little Tree's butt? Chapter 949, Presents from Little Tree 2. No, you can't. Then, can you give it to the hamster queen first? After all, she is also a god-level spirit cultivator, and she can also take this anthropomorphosis fruit. Unfortunately, he was too naive. Milk Tea wanted to hide behind the hamster queen, but Little Tree continued to scratch his bottom and pulled out another anthropomorphosis fruit. He was desperate and looked at young Luo Feng with a deathly gray face. One for each of you, take it. Young Luo Feng hinted that the two should fetch the fruits themselves. The hamster queen didn't mind it. For her, as long as she could improve her strength, she would be willing to eat anything. If a spiritual beast took a human shape, it would be possible for it to become a sage-level spirit cultivator. However, if not, it would stay in the god-level realm in the rest of its life. Gaping at her, Milk Tea watched as the hamster queen swallowed the fruit without frowning, and the corners of his mouth twitched. How could she eat something taken out of Little Tree's butt so easily? While he was trying to find an excuse, young Luo Feng's eyes had fallen on him. Milk Tea trembled and slowly walked towards young Luo Feng as if marching to the field of execution. He took over the fruit from young Luo Feng with his trembling little paw, closed his eyes and stuck it into his mouth. Gulp. Milk Tea swallowed the fruit without chewing it. When the fruit reached his stomach, he felt cold on his lower abdomen and quickly sat down to cultivate. Master, it's going to take some time for them to take the shape of a human being. Xiao Mo looked sympathetically at Milk Tea. If it were him, he might not be able to eat it. What else do you have besides anthropomorphosis fruit? Young Luo Feng asked, looking at Little Tree. Little Tree blinked and stuck his fingers into his butt again. In a moment, he pulled out a light yellow fruit. It's poison immunity fruit. After taking the fruit, you will be immune to poison. Poison immunity. Young Luo Feng carefully took out a piece of cloth and wrapped it. She could give the fruit to her grandfather. What else? Young Luo Feng continued. This time, it took Little Tree quite a while to pull out another fruit. Compared with the other two, this fruit was bright red, as if there was blood in this translucent fruit. It's a millennium blood fruit. Xiao Mo became more excited. Taking this fruit, a god spirit level cultivator can level up, and if a sky spirit level cultivator takes it, they can immediately become a god level spirit cultivator. However, spirit cultivators below sky level can't take it, or they will explode. It had such a great function. A special light glittered in young Luo Feng's eyes. However, after smelling the fruit, she took out a piece of cloth and wrapped it once again. Master, aren't you going to take it? Xiao Mo asked, looking puzzled at young Luo Feng. Young Luo Feng nodded slightly. I can make breakthroughs myself. I don't need the Millennium Blood Fruit. Xiao Mo looked at her serious face, and the corners of his mouth twitched. Obviously, Master didn't want to take the fruit taken out of Little Tree's butt, but she just refused it with some self-righteous words. If Milk Tea, who was in the middle of cultivation, saw this, he would certainly jump with anger. Anything else? Young Luo Feng put away Millennium Blood Fruit and continued to ask. Little Tree shook his head, giggled and opened his arms to young Luo Feng, asking for a hug. Young Luo Feng picked up Little Tree and looked at Xiao Mo, raising her eyebrows. Where did he get these fruits? Master, he's a tree. A tree will bear fruits, but I didn't expect that he could bear 3 different kinds of fruits. And to be honest, I don't know when he will bear these fruits again. Chapter 950, Separation 1. Xiao Mo curled his lips. You should ask him about these things, but he can't speak yet. Xiao Mo, young Luo Feng thought for a while. Do you know how to raise Little Tree? He is not an ordinary child, so we can't feed him with human food, because he can't absorb nutrients from it. We can only feed him with medicinal materials, but he is very picky and might not accept poor ones. Young Luo Feng sighed. It seemed that she would have to get more medicinal materials. Those she had now were not enough to feed Little Tree. Xiao Mo, take care of him for me. Xiao Mo was speechless. How could Master just throw this kid to him? When Xiao Mo was going to say no, young Luo Feng had already left. Giggle. The chubby baby laughed happily, reached out his hands to touch Xiao Mo, slowly crawled onto Xiao Mo's body, and placed his little hand that he stuck into his butt just now onto Xiao Mo's face. Xiao Mo's face turned black. He really wanted to drag this little thing off him and throw him away. Huo, you take care of him, all right. Xiao Mo looked miserably at Huo with pleading eyes. Huo stepped back in horror. This guy is a little devil. I don't want to take care of him. Master gave this task to you, so you should finish it yourself. Swish. Huo ran away quickly after saying this, for fear that Xiao Mo would throw the little devil to her. So, under the blue sky, only Xiao Mo and the chubby baby stared at each other. The Xuanhuan Valley. In the courtyard, countless bodies lay in pools of blood. The old man, who was still arrogant and defiant just before this, had also died. His limbs were broken by vines and his bloody body looked really miserable. Seeing young Luo Feng open her eyes, Yun Xiao walked slowly toward her. A faint smile appeared on his face that was usually expressionless, and his dark eyes filled with deep love for her. The enemies have been settled. Young Luo Feng turned her eyes to him and rose slowly, raising her eyebrows. How did you escape from the black hole? Yun Xiao paused and said, I was afraid something bad would happen to you. Human's potential was unlimited. It was because of this that Yun Xiao managed to escape from the old man's confinement space. Young Luo Feng moved her lips. Just when she was going to say something, Yun Xiao suddenly reached out his hand and pulled her into his arms. Be careful. As soon as he said this, a loud laugh came from the sky, making the surrounding air vibrate. Boy, you are quite perceptive. I appreciate you. In the sky, a linen-robed old man gradually appeared. He gently stroked his white beard and looked down kindly at the man and woman on the ground. Young Luo Feng held Yun Xiao's hand tightly. This man had the same aura with that old man of the Xuanhuan Valley. That was to say, he was also a spirit cultivator above sage level. Why were there so many spirit cultivators above sage level on the continent of no return? Don't look at me like that, little girl. I'm not like the old man of the Xuanhuan Valley. I'm not here to make trouble for you, the old man said with a kind smile. I'm a good man. Young Luo Feng raised her eyebrows. A good man? Do you have those words on your face? The old man paused and laughed. You are very interesting, little girl. But a person like you has to grow up by yourself. If you yield to any power, you'll only be ruined. Trust me, I have sharp eyes.